that championship season is upon us once again, and it's a yearly ride here. This may or may not be a satire. This is our picks for the 2016 NFL playoffs. All the brackets have been finalized. We got wildcard weekend coming up this weekend. The road to Super Bowl 50 officially kicks off now. Now, the thing that separates this video from other prediction videos out there is I'm just not making predictions out of my ass. I'm actually going out there and using a 14-point statistical model. It is a slight variation of the same 14-point model I used to predict the NCAA bowl games, which actually had a really high ratio. I think I went, 5-1 on the New Year's Eve's and New Year's Day's bowl games. So it is kind of an evidence-based practice. The Mississippi game threw me for a loop, but beyond that, doing pretty well. All right, so we're looking at these teams, and we're evaluating them on the following criteria. Excuse me. Their overall passing completion percentage, their yards per attempt passing, their yards per game passing, their yards attempted rushing, their yards per game rushing, third down conversion average, fourth down conversion percentage, and then, of course, looking at defense, same thing as offense, their completion rate of their opponent's passing, their opponent's yards attempt average, their opponent's yards per game average, rushing yards attempt, rushing yards per game, their opponent's field goal percentage, which is something different. Normally, I would go with the team's respective field goal percentage, but this would be kind of an interesting variable, just to see how often these teams are actually letting them get, that close within striking distance and getting points on the board. And, of course, turnover differential. So pretty standard stuff. All right, let's start over here in the AFC, Cincinnati against Pittsburgh. Cincinnati is the third seed, but obviously they're hampered. You got A.J. McCarron at quarterback. Andy Dalton is out. They've won a couple of games, but by and large, this is not really a team built for longevity. As hot as the Steelers have been playing, even with Big Ben being injured a few times, it's kind of hard to not go against Steelers in this one. In case you're wondering, all the passing stats offensively favor Pittsburgh. Rushing, actually a slight tilt towards Cincinnati, but not by much. Third down, fourth down conversion favors Cincinnati, but looking at the passing defense favors Cincinnati, but field goal percentage per opponent tied, but it looks like Steelers actually have the better rushing defense. They're allowing only 3.8 yards per attempt compared to 4.3 per attempt for Cincinnati, 91.2. So yards per game compared to 92.3. Like I said, the Bengals, they're really snake bit. Pittsburgh, they're hitting all the right notes. Great running, great receiving. Big Ben putting up huge numbers every game. It's kind of hard to not see Cincinnati winning this one. And Cincinnati losing this one. My apologies. I know what I was thinking there. So I think Pittsburgh pretty much rolls in this one. It's a 6th seed. That means they have a date with Denver in the divisional playoffs. Houston versus Kansas City. Very interesting matchup. Houston really doing a weird run. They started off, 1-5? But then they came rolling back with won 10 games in a row, largely by defense. Alex Smith has been playing incredible. Very good run game. If you're keen on the stats, obviously passing favors Kansas City. Rushing also favors Kansas City. Split on third down and fourth down conversion. Completion, kind of a split on the passing defense. Completion rate for the opponents of Kansas City is lower, but Houston's actually averaging fewer yards per game. Looking at the running defense stats, favors Kansas City. Field goal percentage of the opponents favors Houston, but the turnover differential is huge. Plus 14 for Kansas City, only plus 5 for Houston. Houston has a good defense. They worked hard to get as far as they did, but Kansas City just have so many offensive weapons. I think their defense is clicking. And Houston, they don't have a quarterback. They really don't have a run game. They're just going out there and, just getting walloped. And I think Kansas City has no problem getting past them. I see them taking this one pretty easily, punching their ticket to a game against New England and Foxborough. All right, now let's switch markers. Going to the NFC. First up, Minnesota versus Seattle. Third seed is Minnesota. Seattle is the 6th seed. Seattle just killing people now. They're looking like a Super Bowl contender after a slow start. Just looking at the stats here, all the passing stats favor Seattle. All of the rushing stats favor Seattle. Third down, fourth down conversion, both favor Seattle. That's not bad enough looking at the passing defense and rushing defense. Favors Seattle. Even turnover differential, +6 for Seattle, +5 for Minnesota. Try to find the most telling stat here. There's lots of good ones. Oh, Seattle averaging 237 yards a game compared to Minnesota with only 183. 141.8 rushing yards per game versus 138.2. Seattle only allowing 210 passing yards per game, 235 for Minnesota. And really the big one, rushing defense, 81.5 yards per game for the opponent Seattle versus, 109.3 yards for Minnesota. So yeah, this is one of those games where Terry Bridgewater's going to throw a lot of interceptions. I think Seattle's going to stifle Adrian Peterson, and Russell Wilson is going to put a lot of points on the board. I think Seattle wins this one, and they go to take on Carolina in the divisional round. Washington, Green Bay. Now, I'm fairly certain about the first three games. I'm pretty much a lock on Pittsburgh, Kansas City, and Seattle to win in the wild card round. This one, if there's one game that I think could go either way, to where I might want to pull the upset lever, I'm going to go in this one. That said, I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to be a coward. I'm going to pick Green Bay. Even though I think Washington definitely has potential for an upset with the way Kirk Cousins has been playing. And obviously, you saw Green Bay collapse against Minnesota on Sunday. So it's not within the realm of possibility. If Washington wins, that would not shock me one iota. But just looking at the stats, on paper, Green Bay is a better team. They have the better rushing. They have the better rushing and passing defense. Allowing 228 yards passing per game compared to 258 for Washington. They're allowing 119.1 yards rushing compared to 122.6 for the Redskins. Their turnover differential +5, 1 point higher than Washington. They're putting up, 115.6 yards rushing compared to 97.9 for Washington. Washington, to be fair, they are putting up more passing yards, 256 per game compared to 219 for Green Bay. But I don't know. I just think the defense of Green Bay is going to put more pressure on the Redskins, and the Redskins' offense is going to put on the defense. I think Green Bay's offense overall is more reliable. So nothing short of Aaron Rodgers just having a brain aneurysm on the field and just utterly collapsing, I think is going to really keep them out of playing for the divisional round against Arizona. But like I said, if I had to pick one where you have to go against me, you might want to go put some money on this one for Washington to win. I think that one has the biggest potential to get the upset out of all these upcoming games. Okay, let's stick with the NFC for the divisional round. Carolina versus Seattle, very, very interesting game. I think it's the rematch of, the 2013 NFC Championship, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, yeah, that's right. Looking at the stats here, passing favors Seattle. Rushing offense, 142.6 yards per game for Carolina. Actually higher than Seattle's 141.8, but Seattle is averaging more yards attempt per rushing, 4.5 to 4.3 if you're wondering. Third down percentage, fourth down percentage conversion favors Seattle. Carolina's passing defense marginally better in terms of completion percentage rate and yards per attempt, but overall, Seattle 210 yards a game allowed compared to 235 for Carolina. Once again, Seattle just dominating on stopping the run. They're only allowing 3.6 yards per game compared to 81.5 for Carolina. Carolina does have a pretty huge turnover differential, +20 compared to +6 for Seattle. But just looking comprehensively, we saw there's a way to beat Carolina with the game against Atlanta in Week 16. And I think Seattle, they're going to do a very good job containing Cam Newton. If he can't go in the backfield and scramble, they're in trouble. And I think they've got the offensive weapons on both sides of the ball, going out there, running it, passing it. I think Russell Wilson's going to have another big day, probably get about 2 or 3 touchdowns. And Seattle, they get the upset. As a 6th seed, they punch their ticket to the NFC Championship for the, 3rd year in a row now? Just calling it like it is. Just looking at the stats, just favors Seattle. They're more potent on offense and defense, so that's that. Arizona against Green Bay. Passing stats obviously favor Arizona. Rushing offense stats favor Arizona. They split on third down and fourth down percentage completion rates. It's kind of a mixed bag as far as passing defense. Green Bay's only allowing 58.3 completion rate compared to 59.9 for Arizona. But overall, 6.9 yards attempt passing for Arizona's opponents compared to 7.1 for Green Bay's opponents. 2.28, 230, kind of negligible in yards per game. Yards rushing defense clearly favors Arizona, laying 91.3 yards per game compared to 119.1 for Green Bay. And turnover differential favors Arizona +9, +5. This is where I see Green Bay's luck running out. Arizona's just way too potent. Carson Palmer, even though they did get squashed on week 17, and more on that later, obviously. I think comprehensively they're a better team than Green Bay. I like the way Carson Palmer's playing better than Aaron Rodgers right now. Running for Arizona is a whole lot better, and I think the defense, especially the running defense, is enough to kind of keep Green Bay off their battle plan. And for that, I've got Arizona as the second seed hosting the NFC Championship. And what do you know? Arizona, Seattle. We'll come back to that in a moment. All right. Moving back up to the AFC. We've got Denver against Pittsburgh. And it's going to be very interesting. Looking at the stats. Pittsburgh, slight advantage as far as completion percentage. Slight average, well, actually a pretty big advantage, 8.2 yards attempt average compared to 7 for Denver. But Denver is actually putting up more yards per game, 248 to 237. Pittsburgh, they dominate the rushing game, 107.8 yards to 107.4 yards, 4.4 yards per attempt rushing compared to 4.2 for Denver. Third down, fourth down conversion, it's a toss-up. Looking here, Denver obviously has a better passing and rushing defense, but we've seen some teams that are not really the best in the league put a hurting on Denver. We saw San Diego keep it close. We saw the Raiders beat them. So as long as you just have a quasi-decent defense and you put pressure, and obviously these guys can beat on the long ball, you stand a chance. And once again, the turnover differential favors Pittsburgh. Denver is actually the only team in the playoffs this year who has a negative turnover differential. They're -4. So here's the thing. Peyton Manning is not the Peyton Manning of yore. Brock Osweiler, if he's put in the limelight, he's going to collapse. Peyton Manning is being held together with like toothpicks and chewing gum at this point. His neck is like Kurt Angle quality. He's basically a walking corpse. Now, they would pull up the big win against San Diego. That's true. The Steelers are not San Diego. They're going to put a lot of pressure on him. He might even get knocked out. He's going to throw some interceptions. And, looking at it, I don't think the Denver's defense has enough gas to actually withhold that multi-pronged attack from Pittsburgh. And you know what? Got to go with the upset. 6th seed knocks off the 1 seed again. I got Pittsburgh making it to another AFC championship. As a Raiders fan, it pains me to say that. Not as much as what I'm about to say now, because I got two teams I absolutely loathe. The Patriots for obvious reasons. The Chiefs for similarly obvious reasons. And this one's interesting. The Patriots, defending Super Bowl champions, they've been playing pretty subpar as of late. That game against Miami tells you pretty much everything you need to know. Look at the stats here. New England, they have better passing yards per attempt average, 7.7, 7.4. Also have more yards per game passing, 287 to 203 for Kansas City. However, Kansas City has the better rushing stats, 4.7 yards per attempt to 3.7, 127.8 rushing yards compared to 87.8. New England, definitely not a rushing team. They split on third down and fourth down conversion. Kansas City, way better passing defense numbers. Only allowing 57.5 completion rate, 6.6 yards per attempt, 231 yards per game compared to New England's 60.6 completion, 7.1 yards per attempt, and 241 yards per game. They actually split dead even, 98.8, 98.2 as far as rushing defense, so that's kind of negligible. But Kansas City, once again, has a better turnover differential, +14, +7. You know what? I'm going to call the upset button on this one. New England, they're second seed. I think Kansas City, their luck continues. I mean, they're just playing very well. It's a good matchup. Tom Brady is not playing at his best. They have no run game. Kansas City can get the run going. There's some obvious gaps there for New England's secondary. And I think it's going to be close, but I hate to say it, got to go with the Chiefs. So here we go. This is our AFC Championship game and our NFC Championship game. Let's start with Pittsburgh versus Kansas City. Very old school, very 1970-ish. I hate both these teams, so who cares? All right, so looking at the stats. Pittsburgh against Kansas City. Passing favors Pittsburgh, but the rushing favors Kansas City. 127.8 yards per game for Kansas City, 107.8 yards rushing for Pittsburgh. Conversely, 208 yards passing versus 203 yards passing for Kansas City. Split on third down and fourth down conversion. Passing defense favors Kansas City. 231 yards a game compared to 249 yards. Rushing favors, once again, kind of a split here. 92.3 yards allowed per game for Pittsburgh, but 4.1 yards attempt average for Kansas City. And plus 14, once again, differential for Pittsburgh. And so all this, if you look at the data, Kansas City has a slight advantage. But you know what? I'm going to go with Pittsburgh. I'm going to go with Pittsburgh for a simple reason. Kansas City is a very, very good game. They run the ball very well. They have a very solid passing defense. That's usually the bedrock of a good team. The problem is they can't pass. Even Alex Smith on his best days, he's not putting up huge numbers. He's not putting up 400, 500 yards a game the same way that Big Ben is doing. And I think when it gets into a shootout and Kansas City collapses, and they will collapse eventually, and Alex Smith can't make those big passes and the run game doesn't get going, I'm going to favor Pittsburgh. They've been in this situation before. They're going to be in Arrowhead Stadium, and they're going to win. So Pittsburgh punching their ticket. Now, NFC Championship. Now, we actually got a preview of this on Week 17 when the Seahawks just murder, death, killed Arizona. So, we saw this directly in action, just a couple hours ago. But just to recap, Arizona has the better passing statistics. Seattle has the better rushing. Seattle, better pass defense. They have the better rushing defense. They don't have the better turnover differential, but my God, did you see the game? Carson Palmer and company, they just absolutely collapsed. And you know what? First verse, same as the first. I don't really see how this game comes out playing any differently. I don't see, Arizona go out there and changing their battle plan and doing anything really effective they didn't do in this game. And Seattle, I think they have it pretty easy. They punched their ticket to Super Bowl 50, and my goodness, what do we have here? It is a rematch of Super Bowl 40, which is kind of weird because I'm about to turn 30, and when I turned 20, it was the Steelers taking on the Seahawks in Super Bowl. When I was 20, about to turn 30, same damn thing. All right, Pittsburgh, Seattle. Third Super Bowl in a row for Seattle. Pittsburgh, this is like what? They're going for their 7th Super Bowl. They've been in like 40. But, just in case you're wondering, passing stats favor Seattle as far as completion and yards per attempt average, even though Pittsburgh does have 288 yards per game compared to 37 for Seattle. However, Seattle has the much better rushing numbers, 4.5 yards per attempt, 141.8 yards per game compared to 4.4 and 107.8 for Pittsburgh. Third down conversion, fourth down conversion actually favors Seattle by a huge margin. Especially, I want to note here the fourth down conversion rate. For Pittsburgh, it's 33.3. For Seattle, it's 88.9, which is just a huge, huge discrepancy. Passing defense favors Seattle. They're allowing 210 yards per game, 249 for Steelers. Looking at the rushing statistics, once again, favors Seattle, only allowing 81.5 games, 92.3 for Pittsburgh. 3.6 yards per attempt for Seattle, 4.3 for Pittsburgh. And plus 6 turnover differential for Seattle compared to the plus 2 for Pittsburgh. So, a lot has been made about the Seattle team. And this is an interesting scenario here because these are both the 6th seeds. I'm not really sure if it's ever happened in the Super Bowl before, but just looking at what we have here, Pittsburgh, they can really throw the ball out. They can run like crazy. They got a good defense. But you know what? Seattle's defense. Offense wins games. Defense wins championships. I think Seattle, when Russell Wilson's rolling, they can definitely throw the ball as well as Big Ben. They can get the ball rolling as well as, the Steelers' rushing game. But Seattle has that defense. They can stop teams from putting up the run. They can stop those big plays in deep territory. And I think if you can contain Big Ben, if you can put the pressure on them, and the Seahawks certainly can, then you can beat the Steelers. We've seen this happen. We've seen this as a blueprint. Pittsburgh, it's been a good run. But Seattle, they're just the total package. So, in case you're wondering, our presumptive champion, Super Bowl 50, for the second time in 3 years, I'm going to go with your Seattle Seahawks.